Good morning, Saints fans. I say morning because it's a noon start. My name is Jeff Nowak. I am a digital sports producer for NOLA.com, and I just wanted to get in here with a quick live chat to answer some quick questions, get you ready for the Saints versus Panthers, which is about to kick off in about 45 minutes. If you have any questions, throw them on in the comments, and I'll see if I can get to them. Otherwise, we can go through a few quick items before we have a kickoff. This is only the second noon start for the Saints. They only have, I want to say, 4 all season. So it's a bit weird because every other game, it seems like you're waiting all day. You're going through all these noon games and either waiting for Monday or waiting for Sunday night or afternoon kickoff. But today we are at noon. And the Saints, historically, at least the last few years, have struggled in noon kickoffs. The loss to the Falcons last year was a noon kickoff. They went down early against the Lions in the noon kickoff in week 3. So it'll be interesting to see how they do, especially without a few key players this week. Again, without Michael Thomas. This time it's a hamstring, unfortunately. It looks like he had a setback as he was trying to get healthy from that ankle injury. And the reports today are that it could be something that hinders him beyond this week, maybe even missing week 8. So the good thing is the Saints have a good amount of experience at this point playing without him. The bad thing is they will also be without Emmanuel Sanders, who has really kind of stepped up in his absence. He had a career high 12 catches against the Chargers, and he is now on the COVID list after a positive test. And because he was described as symptomatic, that means that he is out for at least 10 days. So he will also be out for week 8. So today you're looking at something else. It'll be interesting to see what happens, whether that is Traquan Smith. Deontay Harris is fortunately back healthy, so he could have a big role. Marquez Callaway could have a big role. And the Saints also called up Austin Carr and at least one other person just for some depth there. I don't expect to see a ton out of them in terms of reps, but you could see them in some blocking sets, especially Austin Carr. He has experience doing that. Obviously, the big storyline today, Teddy Bridgewater back in town. Teddy was ready when the Saints needed him last year, and now the Saints have to be ready for Teddy. I know that's corny, but I think it's fun. So the other thing to keep in mind, Nick Easton is out today, so the offensive line could be a little light in its rotation. So we'll hopefully be able to see them hold up pretty well. Let's go through some of the other inactives. JT Gray, also inactive. 3 healthy scratches this week. Malcolm Roach, offensive lineman Derek Kelly, and defensive back DJ Swearinger. They will not be active today. Ken Crawley also was on the COVID list because he was in close proximity to Emmanuel Sanders. They haven't had any other positive tests, so that's a good thing. But yeah, you're facing the Panthers today. They have their own injury issues. They don't have Christian McCaffrey, and you're going to see heavy workload of Mike Davis. If you don't know him well, he's going to do a lot of the same things as McCaffrey, not quite as explosive, but he's a really good pass catcher, and you're going to see them kind of like he's going to have a similar role. If you're used to seeing what Alvin Kamara does, he's going to have a similar role in terms of he might not be as active. Juwan Johnson, that's the other guy. Yep, thank you for that. If he might not have, those kind of like pounding runs between the tackles that you typically see from a running back, but he's going to be very active in the fast game, and he does break tackles like a machine. I want to say he's number 2 in broken tackles behind Alvin Kamara, and it's going to be interesting to see how the Saints linebackers, or more specifically the Saints kind of sub packages with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, CD Deuce, kind of hold up as he really puts pressure on that second level. Teddy Bridgewater, one of the things that he's been doing really well is pushing the ball downfield, especially to Robbie Anderson, a new ad for them this year that most Saints fans probably aren't very familiar with. He spent a lot of time with the Jets, and he is a burner. He will really put pressure. The way Mike Williams put pressure on the Saints secondary, he's going to do that in a different way. Mike Williams was a big, powerful receiver that went up over Marshawn Lattimore a couple times. Robbie Anderson's not going to do that, but he's more in that Deshaun Jackson mold where he's just going to take the top off, and the Saints are going to have to do a good job of kind of putting a lid on him when they can. If that's the way the Panthers beat the Saints today, I think they're actually in good shape because The way the Panthers need to play to win this game is to control the ball and control the time of possession and really kind of just stack first downs with Mike Davis the way the Saints really want to do with Alvin Kamara. It's going to be like looking in a mirror in a lot of ways, because the Panthers, a lot of their offense is predicated around Joe Brady's as their offensive coordinator, who spent time with the Saints, and so much of the Saints' offensive philosophies came out of that tenure. He went over to LSU, and you heard Drew Brees last year kind of talk about, oh, hey, okay, I see all these same tendencies that we used to run with these RPO sets, and you're going to see a lot of the same things. And Teddy Bridgewater knows those sets well. So you saw that kind of in the week 2 matchup with the Raiders, where both teams wanted to do the same thing. The Raiders just did it better. And that's going to be interesting to see what happens today and how Drew Brees chooses to attack without two of his biggest weapons. Last year in week 12, Jared Cook was a big element, and I think he had his biggest game with the Saints so far, and they really attacked Eric Reed in the middle of the field. And I think you'll see a similar scenario today, where they're going to really put a lot of weight on Jared Cook in the middle of the field and see and just kind of, say, okay, Carolina, can you stop him? And if they do, then you'll see a lot more of Alvin Kamara, because in order to stop Jared Cook in the middle of the field, you'll have to kind of lighten up that box a little bit. The guy I expect to see a lot from today, too, is Latavius Murray. Every time the Saints seem to be in a personnel bind, they turn to Latavius Murray, and he has delivered thus far. He did in week 3 with 2 touchdowns. He did in the 2 games last year that Alvin Kamara missed. He had 2 touchdowns in both of those games and a whole lot of yards. And I think even with Kamara there today, losing those receiving threats is going to mean you're going to be using Alvin Kamara a lot more in the passing game, which means that Latavius Murray, I think, are going to see a lot more 21 and 22 personnel. And by that, I mean 2 running backs in either 1 or 2 tight ends. And I think he's going to get a lot of opportunities, and it'll be interesting to see how he reacts to those. But okay, let's go through some of these questions. Key matchups to watch. I think the biggest thing for me is going to be seeing how this offensive line holds up, because you're not going to have these quick hit weapons that you're typically having. And so you want to see the line creating push on run plays, because if you can establish a run, that'll help slow down the pass rush. And you're going to want to see if they can hold up around the edges. If guys aren't getting open immediately, is Brees just forced to dump it down? Is he able to go through his progressions? Because you don't have that, X receiver that you're used to being able to just truck the ball into and trust his hands. You don't have that. You just don't have that. I think Marquez Callaway is an excellent player, and it'll be interesting to see if he can step up today. Traquan Smith, you've got a little experience. He stepped up against the Lions. You'd like to see him do that again today. But it's going to be about comfort. It's going to be about whether Brees trusts these receivers, or whether he's just not liking any of the looks he's getting and checking it down. I think Alvin Kamara is going to lead the team in targets. If I'm making any prediction today, it'll be that Alvin Kamara leads the team in targets. But otherwise, I'm not sure. And on the other end, on the defensive side, it's going to be Robbie Anderson. You're going to need to see someone match up with him and someone run with him. The Saints are getting Janoris Jenkins back today, and I think that will help a lot in terms of how they can match up in the secondary. And DJ Moore on the other side. The Panthers have 2 really good receivers, and I expect you'll see matchups. I expect you'll see Marshawn Lattimore shadow probably DJ Moore, and just because he's a more physical receiver, and I think Marshawn Lattimore thrives in physical coverages. Just look at how he plays Mike Evans every year. And then I think you'll see Janoris Jenkins try to run with Robbie Anderson. So it'll be interesting to see how they hold up with those vertical routes down the field. Let's go through a little more. Is we trying to get Golden Tate? I don't know. But he's a guy that I think that the Saints should take a long look at. The difficulty with Golden Tate is going to be the contract. Usually when you trade for a guy midseason, you're not looking for a guy that you're going to have to kind of finagle that contract in for the next 3 years, one way or the other. You're usually looking at a guy like Dante Pettis, who's just kind of a 1-year rental, because you're really not looking to change anything. You're looking to shore up some of these gaps that have been created by the influx of injuries at the wide receiver position. That said, I think Golden Tate would make a whole lot of sense in this system. And he knows how to wear a golden helmet. He played for Notre Dame, and his name is Golden. It just fits. But it'll be interesting to see how they approach that situation, because every week it's like, oh, Michael Thomas is going to be back. No, he's not. But for the Saints to really be competitive in terms of being a Super Bowl contender, you need Michael Thomas back. So it's not going to be a situation where you try to just find a player to replace him with. You need him back. So I don't know. I think they should kick the tires on Golden Tate and see what they can do in terms of that contract. And the Saints have, it's basically become an annual tradition that the Saints absorb a bad Giants contract. So you had Eli Apple 2 years ago. You had Janoris Jenkins last year. One of those was a trade. One of those Jenkins got waived, and they picked up on waivers. So I think that the front office comfortability is always a factor. These are people, and if they like working together, there's a better chance they get that deal worked out. But that would be, I think any trade is a long shot. The NFL, there's just not that many trades. And you're looking at a situation where with COVID, you can't just make a trade and have them available 3 days later. There's quarantine processes that have to be in place. They have to do testing. So if they made a trade for Golden Tate midweek, he would not be available for that upcoming game. That's what happened with Le'Veon Bell when he signed with the Chiefs this past week. He was not available for week 7. He's available this week. But like in terms of, you're trying to add a guy because you're desperate at wide receiver, it's not the situation where you can just bring him off the street and say, okay, we have a body. You're going to be looking at it like a 10-day wait. So that's something to keep in mind. Who will be our starting receivers? Honestly, I wouldn't get too wrapped up in who's out there to start the game. I would pay attention to who's the first read on a lot of plays, because even if Traquan Smith and Marquez Callaway trot out there, I think you're going to see a lot of Deontay Harris. I think you're going to see a lot of, I don't know. It's tough. I think you're going to see a lot of 2 tight end sets. I think you're going to see a lot of 2 running back sets. And, Alvin Kamara might be you could look at Alvin Kamara and say, okay, he's a running back, but if he's lining up out wide on snaps, he's basically a receiver. So it's tough. Has anyone seen MT yet? Lately? He was at practice this week. He was dressed out on Wednesday, and apparently he tweaked his hamstring. He had tweeted a week before during the bye week that he had a setback, so I don't know if the hamstring had any relation to that. But he is practicing. He is out there. It's got to be frustrating for everyone involved. But yeah, it's an unfortunate situation. Hopefully they can get it right as the season kind of progresses, because they have a really tough stretch coming up. After this game, they have 5 of their next 7 games on the road. They play the Falcons twice, which you can joke about the Falcons being bad all you want. It's always a tough matchup. They went into the Superdome 1-6 last year, and they left with a win. So it's definitely not going to be easy for them one way or the other, and you got to see people step up. Let's see. I hope we don't give Carolina a regular first quarter points sweepstakes like we've given teams lately. That's a good point, Eddie. Yeah, I mean the slow starts has been a problem. That the last 2 games they have been able to survive and I think that's a very fair way to put it. They have survived the last 2 games despite horrid starts. They went down 14-0 against the Lions. They went down 17-3 against the Chargers, and they managed to come back in both of those games. The Chargers game, they may have won it, but they lost it. The Chargers pulled defeat from the jaws of victory in that game. The best Saints defensive player, in my opinion, was the left upright. And it says something about a team when you can win a game like that, but you got to stop putting yourself in that situation, because you're playing the Lions and the Chargers. When you start to get into the teeth of the league, these much better opponents, you're not going to be able to pull off these great escapes, these Houdini-like wins. So and it starts on defense. The offense is going to struggle today. It's going to have moments where you just kind of just throw your hands up. It's like, what was that? That was a team without 2 of its top 2 wide receivers. So keep that in mind. Wait, Sanders is not. Well, no, he will not play in week 8, just based on the timeline that's set. When you're symptomatic, you have a minimum amount of time that you have to be quarantined before you can even start returning to your team. And once that period is passed, then he has to test negative. So like theoretically, even when you pass quarantine, if you are continuing to test positive, you can't return, obviously. So, but the minimum timeline, because he's symptomatic, means that he will not be available for week 8. he might not be available for week 9. It depends on what happens with the testing, but he is definitively out for 2 weeks. I don't know. I have no answer for you. Do what you got to do. Yes, Curtis Samuel is playing. A little sprinkle of Taysom Hill today. I think Taysom Hill is going to be an interesting guy to watch because does he get more reps at wide receiver? Does he get to show off that expanded route tree? Probably. You're talking about a team. You're talking about a Saints team that loses its top 2 wide receivers, but one of the great things about this Saints team is they have so many players that can work in at different positions. Taysom Hill, the majority of his snaps came at tight end so far this season, but he is capable as a wide receiver. You don't put him out there very often because you typically would have a guy like Michael Thomas, a guy like Emmanuel Sanders, Traquan Smith is there. But he's a guy that's more than capable of going out wide and running the entire route tree. So do you see him out there more often? Does he put pressure on the defense? Are you able to motion him from wide sets to tight slot sets and see if that creates confusion on the defensive side of the ball? I don't know, but I think it's a good point, and I think that'll be interesting to see. Receivers need to step up. Of course they do. The NFL TikTok mix has a good point. If Marshawn Lattimore doesn't step up to the plate, will he get the contract he wants? I think the Saints are going to pay Marshawn Lattimore, in my opinion. He's had a rough start, but the cornerback market is so top heavy, and there's a lot of people getting paid a lot of money. And when you find that guy that you like and you pay him, it's not a position that you let walk away, in my opinion. It's not safety. It's not running back. This is a formative piece of a team in a passing league that you just in a position you have to shore up. I think they're probably going to be aggressive next year in the cornerback market and in the defensive back market in general. But I don't think you're going to bring in a guy that's better. So why wouldn't you pay him? Jared Cook. Jared Cook's been interesting. I expected a lot more out of him early in the season. I think he just wasn't right the first few games, and he went out with that groin injury. But he looked better against the Chargers. He looked like he had a little more spring in his legs, and I think that bye week should help him. And he's going to be important today. He's going to be important in kind of splitting the middle of the field and creating tension in the secondary where guys have to make decisions and they have to extend their coverage zones more than they want, and that will open up things underneath for guys like Traquan Smith, guys like Marcus Callaway. And I think, let's see, we have a question about Callaway. Callaway's interesting. He's a guy that Breeze seems to trust, and Peyton and the coaching staff seems to trust a lot. He's a Tennessee guy, so Alvin Kamara likes him. He also went to Tennessee. He's a big receiver. He has good speed. He has good agility. You saw him last week on punt returns and kick returns, and he had an excellent game. He made you forget that the Saints were without Deontay Harris, so an all-pro kick returner. He one muffed punt, one issue in kick return, and that game looks a lot different. They probably don't win if he muffs a punt and gives it away at any point, and that's not a small thing when you're talking about a rookie suddenly in kick return duties. So, I think the moment not being too big for him is a factor, and it's clearly not. So hopefully he can take this opportunity and really show what he has. Are we going to make a move before the trade deadline? And I'll get to a couple more questions here, and then I'll let you go because we're getting nearing kickoff. The trade deadline in the NFL is unlike the trade deadline in every other sport. And it's really easy to look at, a guy on paper and just say, oh, if we add him, we'll be better. If we add, 1, 2, and 3, we'll get to 6. Like, that's not always the case in the NFL. It's a system-based league. It's a system-based, market. And if a guy that sounds like he makes sense on paper, it's not like you're adding him in Madden. You're adding him and asking him to do a very specific set of things. Does he mesh with the quarterback? Do his routes make sense with what, does what he does well match what your team needs to do well? And that's not always the case. You see every year, guys end up in rosters that just don't suit them. And it's hard enough to figure that out before the season with an entire offseason. And, a guy like Kobe Fleener. Remember the Saints brought in Kobe Fleener? He just didn't work. It made so much sense, and it just didn't work. And that's why it becomes difficult to make a trade, because you're investing a lot in a guy that you are, unsure of how he's going to mesh in that system. So it's not very common to see trades made, especially at skill positions, because there's just so much comfortability that goes into it. But I think that if the Saints don't get a receiver back one way or the other, if Michael Thomas, just that injury just keeps lingering and you just aren't sure of where he is going into the latter stage of the season, I think you have to. I think you have to bring in somebody. The COVID situation, obviously, it's not ideal, but it's also not like something that you expect to keep Emmanuel Sanders, on the shelf for. It's not like a hamstring injury where you're just worried about it lingering. Once he's better, you imagine he would be a full go. It's just a matter of getting through that period. But we'll see. It's tough. I don't think the Saints are going to make any big trades. I don't think they're going to over leverage themselves in terms of assets. But there's going to be sellers. There's going to be a lot of teams that are looking to get rid of guys. The Giants, every year they seem to be in fire sale mode. So that's why I think Golden Tate, or even maybe a guy like Sterling Shepard, is an interesting guy to look at. Let's see. No. I don't think the Saints are going to trade Rankins. All right, this is going to be the last one. And yeah, I think it's tough to root against Teddy Bridgewater. It really is. I mean, he's a guy that his career looked like it was over. And he came into New Orleans and he just did everything that was asked of him. He came in and he won games in spite of everything. No one gave him a chance to win those games. I mean, I had my dad. He's not even he lives up in New England. He's calling me, telling me the Saints season is done. Teddy Bridgewater can't win these games, and he comes in and he just does it. And he's a guy who it's impossible not to like him. He's always smiling. He's always upbeat. And it's of all the players that can come in and you want the Saints to beat the crap out of them. It's really tough. I think Saints fans will find a way. But in any game that isn't this one, it's really easy to root for them. But I think most Saints fans are going to be more than happy to yell Teddy's name in a less encouraging fashion this time around. But all right, guys, thanks for checking all this out, guys and gals, I should say. And we got about 20 minutes to kick off. Saints-Panthers at the Superdome. 3,000 fans. Let's see how loud they can be. If the Whistle Monster's there, I like their odds. But all right. Peace, y'all.